Namaste. Welcome to Satsang this evening. Tonight I have a whole bunch of questions here that have been emailed in. As sometimes happens, we seem to get a lot sent in all at once. So I'm going to go through some of those questions, and then we should have some time at the end. If anyone has a question here online live tonight, we can do that too. So let's get started. And first one says, I'd like to share an experience I had with death. 8 years ago, excuse me, 8 years ago, I was with my 91-year-old dad as he was dying. And there was a powerful presence of unseen beings with us. It occurred to me it was his parents and grandparents, as he was very close to them, and I felt they had come to support him in death. It was a powerfully moving and beautiful experience, and I felt immense joy and relief for Dad. As the days and weeks followed, in my thoughts, I heard him speak to me several times. And so, Helen, if all of this is true, it seems awareness not only recognizes itself as living beings, but as unseen beings as well, interacting on the physical as well as the non-physical planes. Looking at this from awareness, I can see that anything and all things are possible as we have unlimited powers. Could you please address this? I'm also fascinated with angels and wonder if you could speak to that as well. With so much love and gratitude, I thank you. So thank you too. It really depends. This becomes really easy, doesn't it? If we change our definition of what living means, because we start off thinking, I am this body, and anything that is physically incarnated, has a physical body, is living. And that when the physical body ends, then life has ended. And as we begin to see clearer what we are actually in all actuality, we might have to find ourselves changing that definition of what living actually means. Is living only limited to the physicality, or is there life before birth, but of a different kind of way? And when we begin to grasp this, it can become clear that beings don't really need a physical body in order to exist. It's an optional extra. Really, a physical body is going to help us evolve faster, to grow and to provide contrast. So when I have a mind and a body can I see my beliefs playing out as my experience. So but I don't need that. It is not where I'm living or located. It is the outermost realms of my existence. But existence itself is as an unseen being, meaning what I really am is not visible to the eyes. Even that's not really true. I am everywhere and everything that I can see. But for the sake of what you're asking here, there are many beings that don't have a physical incarnation, don't have a physical body, and choose not to, or don't need to for whatever reason in particular. And they are not separate to us, just like anyone with a physical body, not separate either. We're all ripples on the ocean of consciousness. We're all vibrations. We're all individual expressions of this one being. Whether it chooses to physically incarnate or not is entirely a choice at that level. Of course, we don't realize that until we've come to a certain extent to come out of the belief that I am the body. So it can seem a shock or surprise that there might be sort of other individual expressions around us that don't have a body, because we have this amnesia of we've forgotten everything that happened before the body came, because we believe we are the body. It cuts off every knowledge that we had of everything that happened in between and before and all of that. most times at least. So those unseen beings, whether you call them angels or guides or previous family members, whatever they're quite often there at the time of physical death to help that being, as you said, because if I believe I am this body and then this body is dying, suddenly finding myself still existing, still living, but without a physical body, can imagine that would be very, very shocking at first. Because I thought when I went, this body goes, and suddenly here I still am, and this body's lying there peacefully now. Then that's an adjustment, sometimes quite a shock to the person. So there are always beings there that help with that process. Just like there's beings that help with the birth of the body and the death of the body, there is a, whatever you want to call them, a group of beings that help with that. So awareness recognizes itself as living beings, but what is living? Does it have to be a physical body? And not so much. Really, living is existing. If I exist, then I'm living, and I can also live with it as a physical body as well. From time to time, bodies will come and go inside me as I experience life as those particular individual expressions. Yeah, you absolutely are unlimited, as you said there. So, and you'll become more and more aware of these. You'll sort of gain a sensitivity to these other beings around, who are generally here to help us and look after us, especially at such tricky stages as leaving the body, so to speak. I hope that helps to explain that one. Okay. Next one. Hi, Helen. I was wondering, as a student, how can I study as well as maintain awareness or the silence? It seems to be more of a resting in that which we are. From a higher viewpoint, I have insights that it's very much possible, but I lose that understanding sometimes when actually sitting down to study. Studying involves comparison, active reading, recalling information, and such. Is this compatible with resting as our reality? Could you elaborate on some tips, methods, or something that could be of help? Thank you very much. So, very intelligent question. So how do we, what do we actually do on the pathway? Resting as the awareness, as the self, as the silence, whatever. Here we're calling it awareness. Let's go with that. And how do I study? How do I take this egoic mechanism that compares two things and use it to be useful? This thing that compares hot and cold, good and bad, wanted, not wanted, high and low, left and right, and all of that. How does that mechanism help us? Can it help us? Do I study as I would traditionally if I was studying for some kind of academic qualification? For me, it did shift. It did change to resting as that more and more and more. And then the comparison of ego, comparing two things in duality, was useful when I seemed to be pulled out of that resting into some thought, some karmic pattern, and seemed to lose my awareness of awareness when awareness was looking at thoughts or something like that. So there was that kind of comparison, noticing two things. This is how I want to be experiencing and feeling. This is how I'm currently experiencing. So that kind of comparison, that study helped in that way to recognize that I must be believing something and looking at what that is. But there was also a kind of study of teachings, scriptures, things like that, which isn't an academic study, not like if I gave you a book to read about any other subject than this, and I said later you're going to be tested on it, and you'd have to try to remember and recall, as you're saying, most of what's in that book as much as possible. But here, the study of it is to live as it. So I can read about truth, I can hear someone speak about it, and the study of it for me is, am I living as that? What I've just read about, is that how my body is feeling, or how my life is going, that type of thing. So there's a comparison there, but a useful comparison of here is, and that really is what the scriptures are for. An example, if we look at things like the Upanishads, an example of how a human being can actually live, what they can actually experience, and looking at that, and am I actually living like that right now? So that's the comparison mechanism in action. So not so much recalling information, but more of a reading, absorbing. The more that we read about the truth and listen to the truth, as we do in Satsang here, the more something is gaining through repetition. The self learns through repetition and begins to act on that information when it's familiar. So the more times we hear it and read it, it's going to be assimilated, but it's not the same kind of assimilation. I might not be able to tell you much about truth, but I might be living it in a very deep way. Don't forget that when we see a teacher who's actually awakened and teaching, they also have this extra faculty of being able to explain it quite well, being able to teach about it. Most people are probably not going to do that or even want to. They're assimilating, their studying of it is, am I living as it? So it's a different kind of study. It might not be that I can form a thought about it very coherently and explain it to someone, my experience, but I will be very much living it here. So losing that understanding sometimes, I have insight that it's very possible, but I lose that understanding sometimes when actually sitting down to study. I would go with what is fun. The other thing here is studying. Why am I studying? Am I studying to deepen and understand? You can read a passage in a book, for example, and really study, what does that mean? What are they trying to say here? And that's different from, or what are my thoughts about this passage? That's different than the traditional way of trying to just put knowledge in your brain and remember as much of it as you can. Kind of like if we were to study poetry, or when we were in school, at least in England, we had to study Shakespeare, and you had to read a particular passage and try to figure out, interpret it, understand what they're saying, rather than just being able to memorize it. Different thing. So I hope that gives you kind of a way forward. You already know how to do this. We all do, but it's always helpful to have a little encouragement. The scriptures, the books, and the writings of teachers, those that have come and gone, are there to inspire us, to show us what is possible, and also to encourage us, and then to give us, sometimes they'll give us the way forward in that writing and teaching. So just comparing what's written there or what's being said to how your experience is, and then asking that question, how do I get to there from here? Well, there isn't a there, but you get what I mean, hopefully. Okay, next one. Hi, Helen. I first heard the words, "You are the Buddha," almost 20 years ago. I knew that was true, and I have been seeking that truth since. I have had many spontaneous awakenings, including some where I was living that truth, I think you mean uninterruptedly, maybe, for hours at a time. I would watch this body-mind from a different space as the me had conversations with other beings, and self would wonder at the things that came out of my mouth, as they were immediately seen, recognized to be fictions of the mind. I'm not laughing at you, I was laughing at the experience, I remember. As soon as the awakening passed, I am back believing that this is happening to me. Even when I focus, I cannot find a self that is aware of the me in real time. I can be aware of the moment that just passed, and I see the me that just believed a thought, but it's a very different from the awakened space where the awareness is in the now and omnipresent. I have done contemplation, and I can see that I still believe that it's the me which should be able to make this shift happen, and that it's what is keeping me back. Whenever it happened spontaneously, when least expected. To say the least, it is very painful knowing the awakened space so intimately, and knowing that is who I am and that it's right here, but still not knowing how to get there consciously. Please share your experience with this, as I'm at a point where both trying and giving up trying feels useless, since it's generated by me, who I know is not real. Much love. Well, that's a very painful place, isn't it? Because you've tasted something deeper, something profound, something real. You've tasted it, it feels like home, it feels complete, and then it seems to disappear. And that is perhaps one of the most painful places to be in our awakening, because it's almost, I know they say it's better to have loved and lost, but not in this situation, you know. And as you said, I was really impressed with what you said here. I can see that I feel it should be the me. It's the me that makes this shift happen, and that's not so. That's what's holding you back. But trying and not trying are also not helpful, because they're coming from this separate me. So in my experience, when I was having these momentary flashes, some of them seem to last longer than others, usually just a couple of seconds of this kind of different space where nothing was wrong, nothing could ever be wrong. I was perfect, complete, and whole, and all of that, you know, the classic description of awakening. And then it seemed to be gone. And like everyone else, I would try hard to get it back. And as you said, I realized eventually that just seemed to push it away further. Any effort to try to get something back is coming from a me that feels it can do some effort to get something back. And it also comes from the assumption that what I want is not here right now. So this awakened state, condition, whatever you want to call it, is absent. That is the assumption. I had it and now it's gone. But just because our mind and body are experiencing some lower frequencies in that moment, much lower than they were before, a couple of seconds before, does that mean it's gone? Or is it still here, but currently eclipsed by the thought, the experience of the thought that I have lost it? Our mind says, yeah, but I didn't feel that way till it actually gone. How can I be experiencing the thought that it's gone? That, you know, how can I actually keep it? How can I experience it continuously? So it's never going to be from more effort, is it? As you said here, trying or not trying. I tried really, really hard to surrender. And then I tried really, really hard not to do anything spiritually. And that backfired too. It made me feel worse, as I'm sure that's where you are here. So if something is here and now and available at all times and all places, then no matter what my current experience, even if I feel like I've lost it, it must be still available. And we can know if the self is everywhere and here at all times, it must still be here, covered over by some lower frequencies going through the body and mind. So to try to get anywhere or change anything is going to be counterproductive. It's coming from this assumption that what I want, which here is this beautiful awakened state, is not here right now. So trying to get somewhere or try to even go backwards to what I was just experiencing is not going to work. The only thing that we can do in that moment, and which is absolutely enough, is to dive deeper into this moment. If I am not feeling how I want to feel in any particular moment, then the only thing that is worthwhile here is to come to understand that I must be experiencing some thought that is obscuring, like clouds in front of the sun. It's obscuring that beautiful space I was just experiencing. I don't even need to know what that thought is. I know it's affecting me. So I can come to an understanding that I am not currently experiencing reality. I'm experiencing my thoughts about reality, whatever they are. It doesn't really matter right here. And then I can open up again with a question like, what is reality? Or what else is there to experience about this moment? Or how deep does this moment go? So it's a kind of opening, a gentle opening to this, the depths of this moment. In those moments, when grace descends, or you have that spontaneous insight in that beautiful space, you are just open. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're completely open to see what's here. And then when it seems to disappear, we've closed up again, and we're really looking at this idea that I can lose this. I can lose it. It's gone. So instead of trying or not trying, we're going to go inwards, deeper into this moment. Most of us spend our entire existence skimming along the surface of this moment. This moment was like this. We're just here skimming along the top like one of those pond skaters, missing the depths of the ocean underneath of what's possible. So whenever I'm suffering, it's always and only because I'm skating across the top, and I can dive deeper into this moment with a question. A question helped me. What else is there about this moment that I'm not experiencing? Or is it really true? It's gone. That was a good one for me. Can I really lose it? Actually, I'm having that experience right now of having lost it, but can I actually lose it if it is what I am? So try those out. They were vital for me. It was shortcutting this most horrible phase of the awakening, because you are so powerful that whatever idea you're believing, you will experience. And once you experience the reality of what you are and how that feels, you then have to, in order to be like that permanently, you have to challenge the thoughts that you're still believing. And we don't know that we believe we can lose it, that it's an experience that comes and goes, that we think that, until we actually have that. So a necessary, but really quite challenging phase. Okay, next one. What time are we on? We've got 3 more here. Hi, Helen. Thank you so much for taking our questions and giving back such fantastic insights. My question is in reference to a Tony Parson interview I watched over the weekend, which crushed me. He rightly said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that nothing happens to anyone. It's just what's happening. This rang totally true for me. And then he said that there wasn't anything the person could do to be liberated or enlightened, as this state is beyond the mind, cannot be grasped, etc., etc. Liberation just happens to the person as well. So if there's no path to liberation, and I'm just as likely to be liberated as not, why am I so driven to know truth? My mind is now ready to give up. I know there is nothing to do, yet my heart aches all the more to know the self. An infinite possible lifetimes of unfulfilled yearning, that's certainly to result in a long, heartbreaking, everlasting now. It's no wonder the masses stay unconscious in their stories of me. So how does one cultivate the patience to wait for spontaneous liberation, while also cooling the heart to prevent frustration, longing, and despair? Another excellent question. Well, I can't comment on any other teacher's teaching because I don't know what they meant by what they say. I can only speak from my own experience. And for me, that kind of teaching was necessary for me at a certain point. This shocking idea that I am not here as a separate being, that there's no one to make this enlightenment thing happen, is true. And it crushed some part of me, rightly so, that was trying to get to some future moment where there was some liberation waiting as the prize, based on the assumption that I'm stuck in bondage right now. As you were saying, these are just ideas of the mind. So that is true. But for me, that was only a halfway realization. It took a while for the fullness of that to hit me. If there is nothing, in fact, that the separate being can do, why on earth are we sitting here in satsang? What is the point of all this then, if there's nothing that we can do? Well, the other side of that is the recognition, the very powerful recognition that the one that wants freedom, that wants to recognize the self, is the self. So who can take action? Who can move towards liberation? The self, meaning you, this powerful driving desire to wake up to truth is already the self feeling a powerful desire to finally see itself clearly. So there's nothing that a separate being can do to move towards awakening, but there's also nothing that a separate being can do to screw it up either, unless we believe that they can. If I believe my ego can get in the way of this, I'll experience that over and over and over. But there isn't an egoic sense of, there's a sense, it isn't a real thing. It isn't a real thing. There's only ever been the infinite formless reality, the one being, the supreme self, everywhere at all times, and appearing as a human being, confused that it's only someone somewhere. So can you actually even fail at awakening from that place? If there is only the self and it's infinitely powerful and it wants to know itself, what can get in the way of that? Other than other ideas it may be entertaining about it not being worthy or ready or ripe or whatever it's saying to itself as a human being. So that's only half the story for me. There isn't a separate being. There's nothing that mind or any of us can do to get to liberation. There's plenty that we can see to help us see we're already that. We're already that. So the more times that we can see and be around people that are telling us you are already where you're trying to get to, that's not a doing, is it? That's not anything that a me is doing. That's the self telling itself, showing up in another body mind vehicle in order to get this message across. And when you first hear some kind of teaching like this, it does destroy something, but it should also be exciting when it fully matures. There is no entity here that might not be worthy or ready or ripe for liberation. There's only the self, a little confused about itself, but still nonetheless the infinite self. And that's really good news, because that means it's just a matter of time before you accept that, and you can accept that right now if you want to. How does one cultivate the patience to wait for spontaneous liberation? I never managed to do that. I never managed to wait for anything. I never had any patience, certainly not about this. I didn't want to wait another second. I demanded inside myself, I must be able to experience this now, right now. If there is only the self, why should there be any time before this recognition really hits? Just if you really want to kind of take this deeper, and this goes for anyone that wants to, spend some time really looking at what does it mean then if there's no self? There's no self, separate self to do anything about this, but what is here then already? If I am not, as I thought, this separate being, then what really am I already? I already am the Buddha, but I'm not experiencing that in my mind and body because I'm experiencing the thought that I am not there yet. And what happens when you throw that out? If you just hold the idea for a second here with me that there's only the self, there's no process in that. There's no becoming in that. There's just an undoing of everything that's gotten in the way of that clearly expressing itself. So I wouldn't wait for anything. I wouldn't cultivate patience. I was never any good at that. I think we wouldn't be here in Satsang if we were good at patience. We're here because we can't live like that anymore as a separate being. Cooling the heart to prevent frustration, longing, and despair. Frustration, longing, and despair are all going to come from thinking that you are not already that. If you want the super, super duper quickest way possible, refuse to accept any other thought than I am already that. I am everywhere at all times. Every time you find yourself thinking about someone else or something else, all this is me, all this is the self. And you will see amazing changes start to happen when you hold on to that. So I hope that helps. I wouldn't cultivate patience at all. I certainly can't tell you how to do that because I never succeeded. I'm impatient, very impatient. Okay. We have a couple more. Let me find the right one. There we go. Dear Helen, I found your recent talk, Are We Ignoring Ourselves, incredibly exciting and inspiring. In encouraging us to make a contrast, it seems to help by allowing a place to that part of us that insists on trying to think or act rather than just be. Is this an appropriate way to understand and use what you're saying? Thank you. Yeah, if I understand you, because we were talking about the phenomena not getting in the way, the phenomena and the phenomena of an egoic sense of self, the idea, the sense of feeling that I am here right now is not an obstacle. It can actually aid by comparison and contrast. And as we were saying, I think with the second question, just because we are beyond the mind doesn't mean we can't use the mind in a constructive way. When we think about, when we sort of gently analyze what it means to be the self, what does it mean to be infinite, as we were just talking about before? What does it mean if there isn't a separate being here and never was? What does that mean? So life got a lot easier for me when I stopped trying to get rid of that, my mind and body and my egoic sense of someone, and actually used it for a purpose that were, really exciting. I wasn't feeling divided anymore. Yes, I am before thoughts, but I'm also appearing as thoughts and mind and this human body and this intellect and this capacity to discern and reason and all of that. And that's not a bad thing, is it? I mean, that's you're showing up as a human being for a reason so that you can compare two seeming opposites of form and formless and come to the conclusion that you are both of those, or that they're not really two. You can't do that without a discernment mechanism, something that compares two things. But then the self then will come to the conclusion that they're one. So contrast, if I'm sitting in meditation and I'm trying to listen to the silence and I'm hearing a dog bark over and over and over again, and my mind will say, I wish that would stop because it's interrupting my meditation, or the next door neighbors are having a party or something, and playing music when you're trying to self-inquire. Can you use the contrast of the noise to help point you back to the silence? Can you use the coming and goingness of the busy train station or airport or supermarket to help you notice the stillness that it's all happening in? All these bodies are rushing around, all these cars driving on different roads, all moving inside that stillness. So it gave me a whole way to fall back in love with the world and phenomena when I really got this. So I hope that is helpful to you. I think you're definitely on the right path. Okay, we'll do this last one and then I'll open it up for some questions here. Hi, Helen, could you please speak about the Ukraine situation in a satsang, how you see it from the non-dual perspective? I know a lot of people are wanting their spiritual teachers to talk about this, but to date there has been very little, if anything, from anyone. Thank you so much. Much love. Okay, so how do I see it from a non-dual perspective? Well, whenever human beings do anything to either other themselves or other human beings or animals or the planet that is less than loving, whenever we do anything harmful or less than loving or anything that doesn't benefit that other being, it is always coming from a lower energy field, a lower level of consciousness, the consciousness of separation, the idea that I am a separate being. All beings are inherently into our own self-preservation. We all take whatever actions we can to preserve our own existence. And that is going to be in a very small circle, isn't it? If I think I'm a separate being. Sometimes that idea is so contracted within us that we will even do things that are harmful to other beings in order to benefit our own self, because we really believe that they are other, they are not us. My definition of me stops at one body, mind, vehicle only. So from the non-dual perspective, we could say energy fields, levels of consciousness are interacting with each other. It's not as if we're looking at it from right or wrong from the self. The mind would definitely say right or wrong, but we could say lower and higher levels of consciousness are playing out. Thoughts that, whilst we don't think them anymore as a self, that we wouldn't want to harm another being. And in fact, it's not possible really to do that as the self, because that other being is yourself. Everything is your own self, and that's been deeply recognized. From the non-dual perspective here, what can we actually do about it? How do we see it differently from the non-dual perspective, from the self, from the sense that there is only one being here? What can we do to help? What is the most effective way to help? And for me, that is what we're doing right here, this deepening of this insight that you are everywhere at all times. And across the globe, we can see the highest to the lowest expression of human behaviors in terms of vibration, not in terms of right and wrong. And that when the self really believes itself to be separate, it will act in ways that are very narcissistic, selfish, self-centered, and all of that. When the self has really recognized itself to be infinite everywhere, it will act in very loving, compassionate ways, non-judgmental ways, and very non-violent ways, and all of that. But not making that right or wrong is the best gift you can give to the world right now. Yes, you would prefer that those people didn't act that way, but do we have to make it wrong? Because if we make it wrong, we are projecting our judgment out onto the world, and we're going to see more of that out there. What we're seeing going on out there is a reflection of what we're holding in here as the self. Not that it's my fault that this thing's going on out there, but as I judge myself and others less, then we will see less of that going on a global scale. As I come to see clearer that everything is myself, then I won't even be able to think about hurting another being, let alone actually take some action that leads to that. There would be a sharing of resources. There would be an infinite supply. There would be giving of anything that needs to be given, sharing freely. It wouldn't be possible to take advantage or to use force or anything like that. And there would be no need anyway. And I want to just finish here with this understanding. The most important thing I feel you can do here to help. And of course, if we're moved to help in a certain way, I don't know, maybe to there's something we can do to help physically, but spiritually, I would like you to really understand what's actually happening when somebody wakes up to the realization of what they really are. When you recognize that you are infinite, to whatever extent, whether it's the first time you've seen that or the 100th time you've seen that. I don't have any edges. I'm appearing as this form, but also all the forms. That is not a local recognition. It's not happening to someone. There isn't a someone getting awakened. What it actually means is that every-awareness that you are is recognizing its every-awareness. The non-local infinite self is recognizing its infinite nature. Why is that important to recognize? Well, the power, the shift, the influence that then comes from that understanding is not limited to one body, mind, vehicle. So every time you have an insight, an epiphany, a realization, you are sending out a vibrational shockwave across all of humanity. Did you know that? Did you know how important it is that every time you judge yourself less and love yourself a bit more, you're making it simultaneously harder for anyone else to do anything unloving? That such is the power of the self, the power of actions coming from the body, mind, vehicle. I am this body, affect only this body and maybe a few beings around me. The power of an understanding coming from the recognition that I am everywhere at all times. I am everything. Is so important. It's not a local phenomenon. There is no separate being that gets awakened. Awakening itself gets awakened, recognizes itself. And there is so much spiritual power that comes with that. If just a handful of beings, and we've seen this proven again and again in studies on mass meditation, mass prayer, that violence in cities and things like that actually reduces down to 0 while a group of beings are earnestly engaged in meditation together or prayer. So imagine what happens when one being wakes up to the truth, or one body, mind, vehicle, I should say. And imagine what happens when 10 do it, and 100. And I'm spending a little bit of time on this because it took me a while to get this, to really get this. It took me a while to understand the significance of my own self-realization, capital S, the self, realizing its every-awareness. So when you sit down to meditate, I really don't want to do this today, I'm really not in the mood. Do you recognize that you are helping those people who are going through that right now with your meditation? How important that is, that all of humanity is operating on a collective level of consciousness. And of course, there are some beings that are at the very top end of that vibration and some at the very bottom end, and we see most of those in the nightly news. But the ones at the top, which is all of you, all one of you, have the biggest influence because they're coming from non-separation, influence energetically. All the actions at the bottom are coming from a thought level only. They only have the energy of a thought. It's just that more people are operating there. So very quickly and easily could we tip the balance here. Just by everyone, if everyone in this satsang right now, just, I'm getting on a rant here, aren't I? Just stop judging themselves for a minute. Something amazing would happen. So it's a non-local recognition, and I really would like you to see the power that comes with that. We can feel that when we're around an awakened being. There's something going on here that's not just from the mind, is it? It's something much more powerful. And there is horrible things going on like this, but there's also an awakening that's gathering pace. One being, one body, mind that awakens is going to awaken a whole lot of beings around it. Then each one of those is going to go, and it doesn't have to take generations. So I will stop there. If anyone would like to, okay, Laurel, yep, whenever you're ready. Quick on the draw there, on the button rather.
But yes, because just what you're talking about is so interesting and important to me. This morning, I'm in your Dissolving the Ego class, and I'm on the first thing and practicing the different ways to access, the big self. And what came to my cat jumped up on me and was purring.
They
I was
feel
petting
it.
her.
They feel that loving, and they know.
Absolutely. And I realized when she does that, I just go into a state of love. Love just starts emanating from me. And mostly when that happens, I just intend it to go through the world, and go into everything. But I was wondering why, in our meditation practice, what is the difference between, being, all of the different ways that we're accessing that state of witnessing ourselves? What is the difference between that and just being love?
Nothing at all.
Oh, okay.
Nothing at all.
I didn't feel it. It felt the same. That's what I was wondering.
I remember realizing silence is love, because it's just quietly allowing, listening. It's deeply interested in everything, deeply listening to a thought as it is to a bird singing, as it is to this conversation. It's the epitome of love, isn't it? It's awareness. It's equally aware of everything. It's not judging this thing. I don't want to be aware of you. I'll be aware of this thing over here. It's just totally open. The reason I don't tend to use that word love so much is because most of us only know very conditional love of ourselves, very being self-judging and unworthiness and all of that. But there is no difference at all. It's just another word, isn't it, that would you could use it alongside all those other ones like silence, stillness, consciousness.
Yeah.
I think for me, sometimes it's helpful to have a word like consciousness, because if I don't feel I can love myself, calling it love might be a challenge, So we have all these different names, but really it's just love, isn't it? And what else could it be if it wanted to create all of this, play with all of these shapes, all these different things? It really would have to be a loving presence to want to do that, wouldn't it? Otherwise, why would it bother? It would just sort of rest as its formlessness and go, I'm quite happy as I am, thank you.
Thank you. Well, because my cat is instant love for me. So I can continue on with that practice.
Absolutely. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question or share something? Okay, well, we will leave it there for tonight then. And lovely. Thank you. Namaste.